So I'm almost done with the divisional recaps of the 2017 NFL Draft. I got the AFC West and NFC West to plow through, and that's what I'm going to do. Let's start off with the AFC West. Taking a look at this division, I'm going to start with the Oakland Raiders. You know, while I opined before that I thought the Cincinnati Bengals had the biggest boom or bust risky draft, and I stand by that, I think beyond question, based off of the circumstance situation, the single riskiest draft pick was not Joe Mixon. It was not a D. Westbrook or some of these other guys. To me, it was Gareon Conley, because you were talking about a guy that was in the middle of an open investigation regarding a sex crime. It took balls or stupidity, or we'll see, for the Oakland Raiders to ultimately take Gareon Conley with their first round pick. This felt like a major roll of the dice, like the type you would see if Al Davis was still alive. Now, granted, he would be doing it for a corner that ran like a 4.31, but you get my idea. You know, it fits kind of the old Raiders mentality of we take everybody else's dregs, we take everybody else's cast-offs, and we win with them. That's kind of what this pick felt like. It felt like an old Oakland Raiders, now Las Vegas Raiders in the future, roll of the dice. That's what it felt like. Now, with that said, it's kind of interesting with Conley because you don't know, and I haven't kept up to date, but I don't think there's been any news since the draft about whether or not he's going to face charges or not. So just because he's an athlete doesn't make him guilty. Sorry, feminazis. But it also doesn't make him innocent either. Sorry, Raiders fans. The truth is we don't know. We can have our beliefs, and because we're sports fans, we'll probably be more inclined to believe that he's innocent. And there's something to that to a degree, especially because we know that the fact of the matter is there are a lot of women out there that get mad at these men and see an opportunity to better themselves and try to pounce upon it, and they don't care who they potentially bring down. You know, it just seems like, you know, just when you look at the grand scheme of things, just from a logic standpoint, and again, you know, when we're talking about male athletes, sometimes logic can kick rocks too. It's not an indication that they're innocent either by any stretch of the imagination. But in the grand scheme of things, you're on the precipice of the NFL draft. For all intents and purposes, you know you've handled the process well. Teams are going back and liking your film, and you're going to be a first-round pick. Frankly, why would you mess with a woman in any way, shape, or form? Your best friend throughout that whole draft process is your right hand, or if so inclined, your left hand. Don't even touch these women, because you bring that into the realm of possibility. And if for no other reason than that, Gareon Conley should have been a second-round pick just from exercising poor judgment. I realize, fellas, you're horny young men, and you're about to get a lot of money. I've been in the horny young men category. 36, still horny young man, so to speak. Sometimes your best friend is your right and or left hand, depending on whether you want to go ambidextrous or not. But what I didn't understand about this pick for the Raiders is that with all the inherent risk, I just didn't buy Gareon Conley as a first-round corner. To me, he was a second-round type of guy. I thought there were better defensive backs on the board, and I didn't see where he projected to me as being that number one type of shutdown cover corner where you could sit there and say, hey, it is worth the potential risk, regardless of how confident you feel in your investigation and your background research. The fact is, it was a risk. And that research could potentially be wrong. And if you're wrong on this, this could set you back on several different levels for many years to come. You're already in a bad community relations space, no matter what you want to say about signing Marshawn Lynch with your remaining time in Oakland, if you even make it through the remaining time in Oakland. Then talking about going to a new market in a couple of years like Las Vegas, you know, do you really want this on your resume? I don't know. And again, I just didn't think the talent justified taking this type of massive risk, especially when I thought their second-round pick, Melon Famu, the safety from UConn, who fits that kind of modern mold of that matchup defensive back that could play free safety, that could play outside against bigger wide receivers. He could play against tight ends and wide receivers in the slot, running backs. He could do all types of different things. I had him as a top 11 or 12 prospect in this entire draft. I thought they got much better value out of their second-round pick than they most certainly did their first-round pick. Now, with that said, I appreciate the approach of identifying your biggest weakness on defense, which was the secondary, and trying to get some young athletes back there. And I think their secondary will be better in 2017 because of it. And I get excited thinking about the potential of Carl Joseph and Melon Fanu playing safety for the Raiders. But other than that, this draft class didn't provide a whole lot, and I thought the pick of Conley was a bit of a reach in round 1, even without the off-the-field concerns. With the off-the-field concerns, it's an entirely different deal. I was floored that they took him in round number 1. I gave him a C grade because just giving the benefit of the doubt and saying the stuff Conley was accused of was crap. That he pans out and he's more like a number 2 type of corner, and then Melon Famu becomes the better player of this draft class. I just don't see where they got a lot else out of it. Maybe Vanderdoes can get back to previous levels, but I didn't see it in 2016. Maybe David Sharp could be a future right tackle for them. But again, you just look at this draft class, and there's not a lot to excite you. It was an average draft class at very best. When you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, I like the pick of Kpassagnon, even though I didn't know that they needed to draft him. I didn't think the selection was that much of a reach. I thought it was about right, based off of the athletic upside, size, and potential. I like the pick of Kareem Hunt in round number 3. I think there's a chance that he could be their starting running back at some point in time during the season. But the fact of the matter is this draft is about the trade that they made up to go get Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback from Texas Tech. Now, Mahomes was my number 1 quarterback in this draft class. I thought the arm talent and the overall upside was tremendous. With that said, he needs a lot of work in terms of his fundamentals. He's not really ready to play yet at the NFL level, which is a good situation for him to get into in Kansas City because he's not going to have to play right away. And in terms of people being concerned about the amount of draft pick currency they gave up to get him, it was going to be a lot more expensive for the Chiefs to move up from the 20s in 2018's draft with a much better quarterback class than it was here in 2017 to go from 27 to 10. I applaud the Chiefs for recognizing the most important thing they needed to address was getting a young quarterback that was the antithesis of Alex Smith in many ways, and most importantly in the arm talent category, understanding that you haven't drafted a quarterback in the first round since 1983 in Todd Blackledge. At some point in time, you had to do it because you've had a run with Alex Smith, and maybe this mere selection of Mahomes gets a little bit more out of Alex Smith, and that's great. And if it doesn't, then you know what? You're ready to move on potentially to a guy that could take you to that next level because this is a team that is pretty well balanced. It's pretty complete. They need a difference maker. And the biggest place they can get a difference maker from is the quarterback position. And that's ultimately what this draft class is going to be measured on. If Patrick Mahomes eventually takes over for Alex Smith and becomes a franchise starting quarterback, then the Chiefs get an A++ for this draft period. And it won't matter that they gave up a 2018 first-round pick to move up from 27 to 10. It's not going to matter. And they were in a position where they had to gamble. And the timing for them was right. And I feel like they got the right guy for them. A team that I didn't really talk about in terms of the biggest draft winners, but I thought did really well for themselves was the Denver Broncos. You look at Garett Bolles, he's got left tackle potential. He's a little bit older in terms of a left tackle prospect, but I think he's able to play left tackle day 1 at the NFL level. I love the pick of DeMarcus Walker in round number 2. I had a higher overall draft grade on him than I did Garett Bolles. It's a team that needed some depth added to their defensive front in that 3-4, or if they're going to run 4-3, or does it really matter? DeMarcus Walker could play in either alignment. I especially loved the pick of Carlos Henderson in the 3rd round from Louisiana Tech. He actually was the highest rated player of mine that the Broncos drafted. I actually had a late 1st round grade on Carlos Henderson. And when you talk about trying to help out your young quarterbacks, whether it's Trevor Siemian or whether it's Paxton Lynch in 2017, you've got Thomas and Sanders on the outside. Now you get another explosive weapon like Carlos Henderson in the slot. That's how you really help out a young quarterback. And then in the 5th round, being able to get a guy that without the ACL tear is a 2nd, 3rd round prospect in Jake Butt, that's worth the gamble. He's a guy that could end up starting for them, if not in 2017, by 2018 for sure. Just a well-balanced tight end, not an explosive player, not a massive blocker, but I think well-rounded enough in enough areas to be a competent NFL starter. So when you look at it, I thought they did really well for themselves here. Personally, I wouldn't have wasted a 7th round pick on Chad Kelly. I don't know why the hell they would do that when they already had Siemian and Lynch. And frankly, I don't see where Chad Kelly in any way, shape, or form deserved to be drafted by anybody. He did not earn that honor to be an NFL draft pick. Too many issues, too many injuries, too much off the field baggage, too much bullshit with this guy. But at the end of the day, the Denver Broncos spent a late 7th round pick on the kid. So does it really matter when he gets cut and added to the practice squad? No. And in today's NFL, you're talking about a lineage there with his uncle being a Hall of Fame quarterback from that great class of '83 and Jim Kelly. In the late 7th round, you gamble on a kid like that and, see what you get. And it's the most important position in sports. So why would you not address it every year or two in the draft in some way or configuration? But I liked the work that the Denver Broncos did here. Their number one need was to get a blindside protector at left tackle. They got that. They needed some depth on their defensive line. They got that. They needed another playmaker on offense. They got that. They needed to address depth at tight end. They did that. I liked a lot of what John Elway did in this draft. And he has established himself as one of the better all-around general managers in the National Football League, period. But I think the biggest winners in this division were the Los Angeles Chargers. You bring in an offensive-minded head coach. You have Phillip Rivers entering the twilight of his career. You could sit there and say, well, they could have really used somebody like a Malik Hooker. They could have really used a defensive player like a Jonathan Allen. And you could definitely make that argument. You could say, well, they could have taken Marshawn Lattimore and paired him with Forrest at corner. And you could also argue that as well. But when all is said and done, you're only going to go as far as Phillip Rivers can take you. And behind that pathetic offensive line, with that shitty-ass receiving core, Phillip Rivers was not going to be able to lead the Chargers anywhere in 2017, just like he wasn't able to in 2016 and 2015. When all said and done, you had to get better on the offensive side of the ball. And that's what the Chargers did. Now, look, I personally would not have taken Mike Williams 7th overall based off of my grading. It was a very big reach. I think Williams was like my 6th rated wide receiver on the board. But as I referenced, even back to my Mike Williams scouting report, there are some teams that are going to value certain traits and characteristics of his, and he'll be much higher on the board. In the grand scheme of things, I get what the Chargers were doing here. You've got a guy that physically could profile as a number one type of wide receiver at the NFL level, and they need that type of guy. Travis Benjamin's not that type of dude. Keenan Allen can't stay healthy enough to be that dude. You needed somebody there, especially with Gates on the way out. Hunter Henry had some flashes, but again, you're talking about the tight end position. Who did you have on the outside? You had to get somebody on the outside. And once Corey Davis went 5, I think it sealed the deal that they had to go with Mike Williams here. And then to come back in rounds 2 and 3 and get one of the best offensive linemen in this draft, and in my opinion, the best offensive lineman in this draft, Forrest from Western Kentucky, a guy who had a first-round grade on. They were able to get him in round 2. And then Dan Feeney, the guard from Indiana, who I had a round 2 grade on, they were able to get in round 3. You're talking about 2 guys that could really help out on the interior of that offensive line, that could help the pass protection for Phillip Rivers, help open up better holes in the running game for Melvin Gordon. It's a win-win-win, especially when you're talking about a guy like Anthony Lynn coming in who prioritizes the running game so much. You got 2 guys that are instantly going to upgrade your offensive line in run blocking and pass protection. This is how you help out Phillip Rivers. And then being able to get a guy like Desmond King in round number 5. He's a guy that could potentially, at worst case scenario, have nickel dime potential at the NFL level, which for all intents and purposes in today's league is a starter, because you're in 5-6 defensive back formations the vast majority of the time. They got 4 starters out of this draft, in my opinion. They did really, really well for themselves. And it's not just that they got 4 starters. They got a guy who has number 1 receiver upside and potential. They've got 2 8 to 10 year starters on the interior of that offensive line. Or if they want to get frisky, they could play Forrest at one of the tackle positions, maybe right tackle, even with his shorter arms. I really liked what the Chargers did here. I don't know that it puts them in playoff position in 2017, but it makes them a better offensive football team and probably makes them a more competitive, more consistent football team, which is important going into the new market with Phillip Rivers at the tail end of his career with a new head coach. He had to get better on offense, and the Chargers did it, and I applaud him for it.